our last video, we discovered that money is a pact of trust. But what happens when that pact is systematically betrayed? Today, every banknote you hold is a promise of value, guaranteed by a central authority. But behind this promise lies the greatest story of power and financial manipulation that the traditional financial world does not want you to know. Welcome to Beyond Crypto. In this journey, we will dig into the foundations of the modern financial system. We will analyze how gold, the state, and debt have intertwined to create an economic prison. For centuries, gold has been the backbone of civilization, not because it was beautiful, but because it was the only brake on uncontrolled power. The gold standard was not just a monetary system, it was a promise of discipline. Until the 20th century, most nations operated under some form of the gold standard. In theory, every dollar or pound in circulation was backed by an equivalent amount of physical gold held by the central bank. This system imposed strict discipline on governments. If a state spent too much or printed too much money, its currency would devalue against gold. Citizens could theoretically exchange their paper money for gold, forcing the government to stop the printing. Gold was the silent guardian of value. But governments hate discipline. Wars, economic crises, and the push for unlimited public spending severely strained the gold standard. Every time a nation had to finance a costly war, the temptation was too strong. Suspend convertibility to print the necessary money. The first fatal blow came in 1933, when President Roosevelt signed Executive Order 6102, making it illegal for American citizens to own gold in large quantities. It was the first step in transforming money from an independent store of value into a state monopoly. But the final blow was yet to come. The real revolution of power occurred in 1944 at Bretton Woods. After World War II, the world needed stability. The agreement established the US dollar as the world's reserve currency, pegged to gold at $35 per ounce. All other currencies were then pegged to the dollar. This created a new global hierarchy. The US Federal Reserve became the de facto central bank of the world. This system, however, was fundamentally flawed. It was a fractional gold standard. The US was obligated to exchange dollars for gold, but as global trade increased, the amount of dollars held by foreign countries far exceeded the gold reserves held in Fort Knox. This imbalance, known as the Triffin dilemma, meant the system was unsustainable. The US had to choose: either maintain the gold peg and limit global liquidity, or print more dollars to support the growing global economy, thus risking the gold peg. They chose the latter. The world's trust in the dollar began to erode. Countries like France, under Charles de Gaulle, began demanding their gold back, exposing the vulnerability of the system. This led to the most significant event in modern financial history. The crucial moment arrived on August 15, 1971. President Richard Nixon, facing a run on the U.S. gold reserves, announced the temporary suspension of the dollar's convertibility into gold. This temporary measure became permanent. It was the Nixon Shock, and it marked the true end of the gold standard. Money officially became fiat, backed by nothing but the full faith and credit of the government. This event was not just a technical change, it was a revolution of power. With the gold anchor gone, central banks gained the absolute power to create money at will. This power is exercised primarily through debt. Every dollar, euro, or yen created today is essentially a loan, a debt instrument. The entire global economy is now built on the continuous expansion of debt. The state and the banking system became one, with the central bank acting as the sole, unquestioned issuer of the currency. This centralization of power led to three major consequences that directly impact your life today. First, inflation. The continuous expansion of the money supply, no longer constrained by gold, inevitably devalues the currency. This is not a natural economic phenomenon. It is a policy choice. Inflation is a hidden tax on the savings of every citizen, silently transferring wealth from the prudent to the state and the financial elite. Second, economic instability. The ability to manipulate interest rates and print money allows central banks to create massive credit bubbles. These bubbles lead to periods of artificial prosperity, followed inevitably by painful and destructive crashes, such as the 2008 financial crisis. The system requires constant intervention and expansion to avoid collapse, creating a perpetual cycle of boom and bust. Third, financial control and censorship. In a centralized system, every transaction is visible, traceable, and ultimately controllable by the central authority. Your financial freedom is conditional. If you step out of line, your access to the system can be revoked with the flip of a switch. The history of the last 50 years, since 1971, is the history of the age of debt. Governments have used their unlimited printing power to fund deficits, expand the welfare state, and wage wars, passing the cost onto future generations through inflation and debt. The average citizen, working hard and saving diligently, is unknowingly playing a game rigged by those who control the money supply. This is the truth the financial elite prefers to keep hidden behind complex jargon and media narratives. They want you to focus on the prices, not the system. They want you to trust the authority, not the math. But the system is showing cracks. The record levels of global debt, the increasing frequency of financial crises, and the erosion of privacy are all symptoms that the Fiat experiment, based on centralized power, is reaching its limit. This brings us back to the fundamental question. If the state and the banking system have proven themselves to be unreliable custodians of our value, where can we turn? We need a system that restores the discipline of the gold standard without the physical limitations of gold. We need a form of money that separates the state from the currency. We need a system based on verifiable truth, not on fragile trust. This is the historical context that gives birth to Bitcoin. It is not just a digital asset, it is the ultimate response to the 50-year failure of the fiat system. Bitcoin is the digital gold standard, a system that cannot be manipulated by any central authority. It is the only true separation of money and state in history. Understanding this history is the key to understanding the future. It is the key to understanding why we are here. If this deep dive into the history of power and the global financial system resonated with you, and you want to continue exploring the truth behind the money, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. In our next video, we will analyze the collapse of the fiat system, how inflation and money printing made Bitcoin necessary. Leave a comment below. What is the single most important lesson we should learn from the end of the gold standard? We are beyond crypto. See you in the next video.